I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about some of the contributors that are here tonight. First of all, we have Joseph Geisner. I've known him as Joe. I think I met, the earliest memory I have of knowing Joe was from like the mid-'80s.
You were just little. You were just a little guy.
He came and ended up staying at my home one year during the Sunstone Symposium, and we hung out, and I think that was like 86 or 87, so I would have been 11 years old, something like that. So we have a long, long history, and he's got an amazing book collection. He's been collecting books for as long as I've known him. And then on top of that is all of his material collection of documents, and I don't even know how many, but it's got to be probably terabytes full of information that this guy has compiled over the years. So it's great to be able to see a couple of books that he's been able to put together, and he's given lots and lots of presentations, especially at Sunstone, about lots of different topics. He's always a good chair for your session there. He actually created the chronologies that are found in this series here, which is the Confessions of a Mormon Historian, edited by Gary Bergera, who's also here tonight to speak. This is the Leonard Arrington Diaries. An incredible group of documents here. And an amazing price. They're regularly $150 on sale for $69.99. So if you don't have the Arrington Diaries, now's the time to invest. We're going to stick with Gary Bergera really quick and just show you a couple of books that he's published in recent years. Justice and Mercy, Studies of Transgression in the Latter-day Saint Community, available in hardback and paperback. And then, now published quite a few years ago, but this is probably our best-selling book that I can think of. Conflict in the Quorum, Orson Pratt, Brigham Young, Joseph Smith. These are on sale for $9.99 if you're interested in a copy of that. Okay, moving on. Got Alice Faulkner Burch has agreed to be here tonight. This is a collection of stories that she's put together. My Lord, He Calls Me, Stories of Faith by Black American Latter-day Saints. We appreciate her being here. If you have another book, I apologize, I don't know of it. So that's it so far. So a chapter in one and a book here. Okay, Connell O'Donovan. He has a great chapter. This is a series on polygamy called The Persistence of Polygamy. It's edited by Newell Bringhurst and Craig Foster. This is volume 2. Really important history here that Connell has published, and hopefully we'll see a lot more from him in the future. And I actually have a specific introduction for him. Connell O'Donovan is a historian, biographer, and professional genealogist. He is currently working on a film documentary on the double suicide of 2 young LDS lesbians in Salt Lake City in 1926, as well as a book on the history of drag in Utah from 1871 to present, to be published by Signature Books. The Utah Historical Quarterly will also be publishing his transgender history of Utah from pre-colonial times to the 1940s as part of the Peoples of Utah Revisited project in 2026. Connell currently is the chair of the Mildred Berryman Institute for LGBTIQ+ Utah History. His main calling in life, however, is posting horrible puns on Facebook in order to annoy his friends and family. I've never been annoyed. I think it's great. Okay. Thanks for being here.
I'll have to try harder then.
You've done a great job. Okay, moving on, we have Michael Homer, who's going to speak to us tonight. I just have a couple of representative books of his. On the Way to Somewhere Else, European Sojourners in the Mormon West. This was originally part of the Kingdom in the West series, published by the Arthur Clarke Company and edited by Will Bagley. Mike also has a monumental book on the history, or the history of Mormons and Masonry. Sadly, Mike, I am sold out of the book and couldn't get them here fast enough.
It's coming out in paper.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping to get paper before. But if you need a good book on Mormons and Masons, Mike Homer's is the one. I did want to show you a little specialty book that he's published as well. This is the journals of James Burtock. He's an early Italian saint. Mike has a long history of studying the history of the church in Italy as a former missionary, and has contributed to several books. This is a limited edition. There are only 20 copies of this made. So if you're interested in something like that, come see us after. Okay. Sorry, this is going long. Bruce Van Orden, quickly. A couple of books that Bruce has published. Early in his career, Building Zion, the Latter-day Saints in Europe. He did The Life of George Reynolds, Prisoner for Conscience Sake. And then most recently, and one that is out of print and hard to find, We'll Sing and We'll Shout, The Life and Times of W.W. Phelps. Excellent history on Phelps. Okay, last but not least, we have Jill Derr with us tonight. We're so grateful that she could come. I just want to show you a couple of things that have been the body of her work for many years. Eliza, The Life and Faith of Eliza R. Snow, co-authored with Carolyn Davidson. She's also a co-author of The First 50 Years of the Relief Society, Key Documents. She, along with Janet Cannon and Maureen Beecher, did Women of Covenant, The Story of Relief Society. And somewhere, there's a collection of all of Eliza R. Snow's poems as well that we have that's out of print. So that's your contributors that are here tonight.
Did you cover Gary?
Yeah, I did, Gary.
Okay.
First name.
I was asleep, sorry.
So those are who you have to speak tonight. They'll probably mention some of these book projects, or maybe it's something else that they choose to talk about, but we really appreciate them being here, and I'll turn the time over to Joe.
Yeah, probably. Otherwise I'll drop it. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you're not here to listen to me. So, I think we'll do alphabetical. So that means Gary's going to be first, then Alice, then Jill. Make sure I do this correctly. Then Mike, then Connell, and then Bruce. Did I miss anybody? So that's the way we'll do it.
Okay.
So my introduction, Gary was kind enough to ask me probably close to 10 years ago if I would be willing to do a book. And we discussed various ideas. And Bob Flanders, I'm getting old and I forget names. Bob Flanders wrote a book called Nauvoo on My Mind. And it was published and very few people have ever seen it because it was published in an off-print that the John Whitmer Historical Association did during a Nauvoo conference that was, I think, now almost 20 years ago. And it's a big, huge volume. It doesn't fit their normal volumes. And you had to pay extra to get it and everything. And I did. And I got to meet Bob, actually even before he had dementia. And then we would talk every once in a while after he got dementia. And just a wonderful person. But that, I talked to Gary, I said, that's what I want to do, is have people write about their books, like Bob did in this off-print. So this introduction, I went to Gary and I said, I know this is a weird introduction, but it's personal to me. These books are personal to me, and I really want this introduction. So I start out. The year 2021-2022 was a period of painful loss in my world of friends and family. I lost my beautiful wife of 39 years, my stepfather who raised me, my uncle and my brother-in-law, all people who played major roles in my life. The Mormon history and book communities lost many people that same year as well. Those who passed away and had the greatest impact on me were D. Michael Quinn, Hugh McKell, Kurt Bench, and Will Bagley. Now, I wrote this before Levina passed away, and obviously Levina was an equal mentor to me, so she would have been included in this, but just the way logistics happened. Quinn and Bagley wrote chapters in the first volume of Writing Mormon History, which, by the way, that first volume also Linda King Newell has since passed away. I will forever be grateful they were able to be a part of that book and that readers have access to their stories. I'm now going to jump just to one person because I think it's appropriate for tonight. I learned of Salt Lake City bookseller Kurt Bench when I attended the 1988 Sunstone West Symposium in Concord, California. One of my friends introduced me to Ann Wild and her husband, Ogden Kraut, which is fun because Ann then introduced me to Sam Taylor, which was a whole nother wonderful experience. Ann saw in me someone who craved a place where I could buy Mormon scholarly books, and she happened to work at a new bookstore in Salt Lake City near the old Rio Grande train station. Ann gave me a card bearing the Benchmark Books address and telephone number. I made my first of dozens of treks to Kurt's store and later to his store on Main Street. I spent hours with Kurt, regaling me with his experiences with various authors, various first edition books, various hard-to-find books, and Mark Kaufman. The last time I saw Kurt was at the Salt Lake City Sunstone Symposium on July 30th, 2021. We talked about how much he enjoyed writing a blurb for the first volume of Writing Mormon History, and how much he enjoyed reading the book. On Monday, August 1st, Kurt texted me that he had forgotten to have me sign his personal copy of the book. I replied that I was leaving for home but could swing by his store on my way out of town. He got busy and did not text me until I was 30 miles west of Wendover, Nevada. Kurt's final words to me were, "I'll have to have you sign the book the next time you're in Salt Lake City." Kurt died from a congenital heart defect a little more than 2 weeks later on August 17th. Kurt was so important to me. I don't know what percentage, maybe 50%, maybe 40%, but a huge number of my collection, which is my wife currently, Carrie, can attest fills up walls in our house. So I want to thank Benchmark Books, and I'd now like to turn the time over to Gary Bergera.
Yay,
I can't figure out how to take this. Oh, there. There we go. Do you want me to do it, or you can?
No, I'm just gonna hold it like this because I'm not anticipating talking for very long. So the essay that I wrote for the book was on the Seventh East Press, and it's one of my problems is that I have a really hard time saying no to Joe and to Chris. And that's probably why I'm here right now. My preference would be not to. It would be to listen to these other people who've actually written books that they talk about in Joe's book. The Seventh East Press I was peripherally involved with, and it's sobering for me to realize that the Seventh East Press it's going to be 44 years old this year, and some of you might not have been born then. Although looking out, it's probably everybody here was probably. I'm not sure how to describe the Seventh East Press. It was a student newspaper, an unofficial student newspaper at BYU. It lasted about a year and a half, was kicked off campus, tried to survive, and then died. Dean Huffaker's essay is a really good essay in this book, and he was the last real editor of the Seventh East Press. His is a really good essay. I would encourage you, if any of you are interested in the history of the Seventh East Press, his essay is really good. For me,
Just comment, it is the first time Dean has ever spoken public about it.
so Joe just said that this is the first time that Dean has ever really spoken about or addressed his time as editor of the Seventh East Press. I don't know. I'm not sure what place the Seventh East Press occupies in LDS history. I know for me it was a defining experience. It was, the Seventh East Press led me to meet George Smith, which led me to Signature Books, which led me to Smith Pettit, which has now led me to retirement. So that's kind of how, I'm going to be turning 70 next week. So it's been, the legacy of the Seventh East Press for me has been one of the most important things in my life. The only thing I really want to point out about the essay that I wrote is that it's, as I describe it in the title, it's a partial essay. It's partial in the sense that it's incomplete. It's just my experience. If you talked with other people, with Maxine or Ron or Elbert, they would have their own histories of the Seventh East Press too. This is just my experience of the Seventh East Press. And the other is partial in the sense that I'm biased. I don't know how to approach the history of the Seventh East Press truly objectively, because it was important for me. And my feelings about the Seventh East Press are almost uniformly positive. Other people's experience of the Seventh East Press might not have been as positive, but for me it was a genuinely positive experience. The Seventh East Press, I want to think that the Seventh East Press survives as a monument to student independence and to engagement with the intellectual life and to everything positive that the LDS Church at that time had to say about the life of the mind. And that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
Thanks. We hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alice Faulkner Burch. If I get nervous, my voice will go down, and I apologize for that. I'm not nervous tonight, but I am really tired. Valdez. Take good ones, okay?
I will.
You do that. So my essay is about the backstory of doing My Lord, He Calls Me. It is the first complete book that I've been asked to do or that I've done, and it wasn't until quite a ways into it that I realized how revolutionary the book was. Deseret Book had decided to pursue or step out and take the initiative to lead out in doing something about the attitudes and behaviors of racism in the church. And the book that I did was the first book towards that goal. And the book that Paul Reeve did, Let's Talk About Race and the Priesthood, was the second book in that goal. I don't know if they've continued to do that, because I haven't really tracked them. So that's why this is my backstory. So I write about that, about what I went through in compiling it. And there are a lot of stories that I share, and there are a lot that I leave out that are just too personal. I'm just going to read a little bit. I responded to the product manager positively, and within a few days we spoke via phone. I received clarification as to what she and Deseret Book wanted after I explained that there is a cultural difference between Black Americans and other Black people of the African diaspora. Black Americans, also referred to as African Americans, are the descendants of those who were brought to this country enslaved, and our ancestral lines go directly to these enslaved ancestors who remained in the United States after emancipation and created a culture that was handed down to us. Contrary to what many people think, Black Americans do have a culture unique from others of the African diaspora. When she asked what group I recommended the focus of our book be on, I heartily responded, the Black American members of the church, because we are consistently overlooked by church leaders. My whole being, doing a twisty happy dance while Sam Cooke's Twistin' the Night Away played inside me. I was asked to prepare a list of suggestions of what our book could be about and send it to her in preparation for another meeting. My twist happy dance continued through the LDS church. My twist happy dance continued through the evening. A book particularly for Black American members of the LDS church. Each time the thought arose in me, the song played again, and I danced, twisting the night away with the hope of what this could mean for so many members of the church, both Black American and white American, as well as the relationship between us and towards those of my community. Our book has won 3 awards to date, 2 from Latter-day Saints in Publishing, Media, and the Arts, first place audiobook and second place history biography. The 3rd award came from the Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage. I have witnessed the fulfillment of God's word to me personally that our book would win awards. The significance of these awards is not for any attention or glamour garnered. The LDS PMA awards are from our own society within the church, while the recognition by Sons and Daughters is Black American based and the first Black American lineage society in the U.S. that focuses on recognizing books that tell the history of and that honor my community. Thereby, our book and our stories have been recognized by both of the communities to which Black Latter-day Saints belong, LDS and Black American. God created us to be connected to each other. We, as fellow church members and as fellow inhabitants upon this whole world, become disheveled when disconnected. Too many people have fallen down the well of falsehood, believing that we cannot be united or connected in our differences. Our commonalities are to help us feel comfortable with one another, hence why we all have something in common with everyone. Our differences are to make us stronger together, regardless whether we like those differences or not. It is not a leader of a country or of a church who calls us to come into and unto the light of truth and soak it in. It is not a leader of a company or a community who calls us to gather. Our Lord, He calls us. I went through a lot of really personal things while compiling My Lord, He Calls Me. And I'm going to share 2 things here that I don't share in my essay about writing the book. One is that my Robert and I decided to go to Georgia and spend about a month and a half, 2 months with his sister who had cancer. And I worked on the book while we were there and took care of Lisa while I did that. Going up and down the stairs and bringing her down the stairs and fixing her meals and us going out and doing things. And so that was all tied up into the book for me. So there is a lot of emotion and a lot of sentimentality. And I'm a sentimental person by nature anyway, tied up into doing that book. And the other thing that I will share is that there are 2 people that I called and asked advice for about whether to do the project for Deseret Book or not, because a lot of people had told me that Deseret Book will cheat you, will not treat you right, and especially if you're not white American. And so I was really scared about doing the project. And so I called a couple of people that I really trusted. One person I talked with was Sherry Silver, who's no longer here. And she talked with me for quite a while, and she said everything that was very rational and, you know, all that good stuff. And then excuse me, I'm really tired today. Then I talked with Kate Holbrook. I called her and told her I needed to talk with her and I needed her advice, and I told her what was going on. And I didn't know at the time that Kate's cancer had gotten worse, and she was sicker, and she took the time to talk with me. I'm really tired, I'm sorry. And she shared some things with me that really heavily impacted me. And in all honesty, if it had not been for Kate, I would not have proceeded with the book because of what she did tell me, of what she shared with me. And then in the process of promoting the book, Kate passed away. And I think all the time about what she said to me and about the work that I'm involved in doing Black history work here in the state of Utah. And I'm really glad that I did the book. But it was also really hard, and a lot went into it. I'm really grateful for Joe giving me the opportunity to share the backstory, and I told him, I will do this because this will be the last time I ever talk about the backstory of writing, of compiling My Lord, He Calls Me. And when people ask me, I will say, you'll need to go by Joe's book because I don't talk about it anymore. I've written it out, and as much as I'm going to share publicly has already been shared, and I won't share it anymore. So that's all I wanted to share. I don't know who's next. I can't see where this is. There it is. Can you get it okay? You can stand right there.
Well, it's hard to say anything after those beautiful remarks, Alice. Thank you. My story is a little simpler, maybe a little more complicated, but I was asked to work on a history of the Relief Society way back in 1980, and that tells you how old I am. Of course, I was very young then, but that was an invitation from Sister Barbara Smith, who was then the general president of the Relief Society. I had been working in the old church historical department for several years and was just getting ready to leave the department because of our family situation, having married Brooke, and we had 3 children came with that marriage, and we had a baby, and it was time to move away from full-time employment. So it was a moment in time when church history, the department under the direction of G. Homer Durham, wanted to have contract histories rather than the department sponsoring histories as they had with the story of the Latter-day Saints, published by Deseret Book, written by Glenn Leonard and James Allen. So it was a different moment in time, and so I was asked to work with Janet Cannon, who was had been a counselor to Barbara Smith. So that is how this project got started so very long ago, and it was many years in the writing and finishing and reviewing and publishing. So I wanted to make just a couple of comments about my essay and what that essay talks about. It's hard to believe that it took so long to finish that book, and when you read that long essay of mine, you will see you'll see why. But 2 comments I want to make. One, this was a personal journey for me, I've written an institutional history, but it was a very personal journey, and my essay kind of talks about family circumstances and changes in our lives, along with changes in the church and in church history. So I'm just thinking of what an experience this was in terms of remembering and bringing things to remembrance. And that wasn't as simple as I thought it might be. I really am indebted to Gary Bergera for his work on the Leonard Arrington diaries, because that became a really important part of putting this story together. Also Greg Prince's biography of Leonard Arrington. And another thing that was indispensable to me was Ron Esplin, my colleague at Church History and in the Smith Institute, who filled in a lot of gaps for me. And it was just surprising to pass some things by Ron, who cleared up a lot of my mistaken memories. It really gave me a sense of how fallible the human memory is. So that remembering was really important to me as I started to reconstruct what it was like to work with Sister Cannon, what it was like to move abroad. Brooke and I lived first in France and then in Switzerland during the process of writing this book. And those experiences certainly informed the way I felt about Relief Society and the church. I also became aware of how very different Sister Cannon and I were in our approaches, and that led to some clashes later on as we disagreed about what needed to be included or not included. I was very committed to including stories of women's healing, for example. She thought that was something we should avoid. So it was an interesting negotiation. Also in the course of those travels, it was important to have help, and that's when Maureen Beecher came aboard as a third author. So it was a long experience, especially the reviews by Deseret Book and ultimately by general authorities. And it was also a difficult experience to get reviews that were not positive about those who expected something that was more assertive, more feminist, more scholarly. That was devastating at times. It also fueled my commitment to work on Relief Society documents and be able to get out a fuller story of the Relief Society through the actual documents. So even though Maureen and I had worked from, I would say, about 1976 forward to get the original documents of the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo published, we did not have permission to do that until under the direction of Marlon Jensen and the new Church History Department. They were published as part of the book Kurt showed you, the selected documents in Relief Society history, and that was many years later in 2016. So some things take a lot of time and a lot of patience, and it was really rewarding to me to see that come to fruition. The last thing I'd like to say is that I really appreciate Joe's invitation and this book, because it really gave me a sense of how much Mormon history has changed and developed and evolved in the years certainly since I began Women of Covenant in 1980, and even when it was finished in 92, and in recent years. I have just loved reading the work of those who have explored new questions. You know, history is always driven by the questions we ask, and I love the new questions and the new approaches. Those who came from the perspective of religious studies have written a very different kind of history than I could have written with my background. So I appreciate the authors who are here and those who are not, who have added to my understanding of Mormon history as an expanding field. And seeing Christian here, I just want to say, and hearing what Alice had to say, how difficult it is to have lost colleagues like Lavina and Linda King Newell and Kate Holbrook and Sherry Silver and Melissa Inouye, who have been friends and co-workers. And I know how enthusiastic and how proud they would be of the work that's going forward in women's history and in Mormon history generally. Thank you.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure to visit Benchmark Books. And when Joe invited me this evening, I decided to write a 2.5-minute talk, but I forgot to time it out. But I think we're in the mark here, because I'm used to having judges cut me off. Believe me, they do. Most of those who contributed to writing Mormon history too were raised in Restoration churches and were encouraged at an early age to pay attention to Mormon history. In my case, I remember attending a sacrament meeting in the Canon 6th Ward when Joseph Fielding Smith spoke. Before the opening prayer, Bishop Gold motioned to me to approach the stand where Joseph Fielding Smith's wife, Jessie Evans Smith, handed me her keys to their white Rambler American and instructed me to make sure she had remembered to lock the doors. This was the West Side, after all. I followed her instructions and returned the keys before the opening song. After Joseph Fielding and his wife performed one of their famous duets, which Joseph Fielding referred to duets as he glared at his wife, he mounted the pulpit where he spoke about his new book, Take Heed to Yourselves, and emphasized to the congregation how important it was to inform ourselves about the events of the Restoration. After he finished, I was convinced, and I was determined to take his advice. The following weekend, I took the 10 Poplar Grove bus to Sam Weller's on Main Street, and Sam, after asking me what my weekly allowance was, sold me a first edition of Joseph Fielding Smith's Essentials in Church History for $2. I devoured the book and learned about the many moves church members made before arriving in the Salt Lake Valley, and read for the first time about other more controversial aspects of Mormonism, including polygamy and the Mountain Meadows Massacre. 7 years later, Joseph Fielding Smith called me to serve as a missionary in the Italy North Mission. During my stay in the barracks of the old mission home, located at the old Lafayette School on 75 East North Temple, we heard addresses by many general authorities. But the most memorable was Joseph Fielding Smith, who again reminded us how important the Restoration was. I was sure that Joseph Fielding Smith was my patron saint, and I was glad I had smuggled a copy of his Essentials in Church History into my suitcase. After we transferred to the language training mission located in the Iona House in Provo, I continued to consult Smith's Magnus Opus, and I was shocked when he died shortly before we departed for Italy, even though he was just short of 96 years old. In Italy, I became interested in the history of the 19th century mission that resulted in the conversion of my great-grandfather, which I mention in my chapter of Writing Mormon History too. But I also became aware that others had written about Mormonism. And ironically, my first golden contact, named Roberto Monja, made me aware of this when he purchased a copy of Catholic sociologist Thomas O'Day's book, The Mormons, I Mormoni, which was published in Italian in the early 60s and sold for 15,000 lira. Now, you may think that's a lot, but that was actually less than what I bought Essentials of Church History for, which, by the way, was that I mentioned before. it was a good vocabulary builder, but it also introduced one to many new details concerning Mormonism. Roberto also read it and made many notes in the margins, including, "I didn't know that. Is it true?" And even La Dolce Vita. Now, I doubt that he was referring to Fellini's famous 1960 film that was still all in rage in Italy. But instead, as a lapsed Catholic, because who else asked the missionaries over except for lapsed Catholics, understood there was a backstory to Mormonism not included in the 6th Uniform Missionary Discussions. After reading O'Day, he immediately requested to be baptized. I believe that O'Day's book has also stimulated our Catholic friends who wrote 2 of the chapters in Joe's fine collection of essays, and have now joined us Mormons to create Writing Mormon History too. We have all, Mormons and non-Mormons, remained curious, discovered a more nuanced history, and we have written about it. Thank you.
It's tricky.
Can everybody hear me all right? Yes. So my name's Connell O'Donovan, and I'm a double Virgo with a Scorpio moon. And my essay, Gary, I'm not a book author, so I don't know that I really fit in with this esteemed group
Gary
of folks.
and I fought and argued, and actually we both were. The consensus among Gary and I at the time was you were essential.
I was essential for this.
Essential.
Thank you. Well, but I do have a pretty good corpus of publications, but it's just papers. Signature Books has one manuscript currently. A second one is coming soon, and I'm about to propose a third book. But and I want to give a shout out to Signature, because they've just, especially Barbara Jones Brown, she has been so supportive. So as my introduction mentioned, I'm the new chair of the Mildred Berryman Institute for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Intersex, Queer, plus Utah History. And we meet there. We have monthly lectures, and we meet at Signature Books. We have one tomorrow night. I'm really excited for it. And before Barbara, Gary has been super supportive. I have horrible imposter syndrome, and Gary's pulled me off the cliff one significant time where I was just not doing well about all of this stuff. I only have a high school degree, so that's been something I've really struggled with. My essay in this is called My History of Queer LDS History, and it deals a lot with gathering this information and an oral tradition through Affirmation, which is the support group for LGBT Mormons, Latter-day Saints, excuse me. And I don't want to dead name the LDS Church. And so I had done all this research, and this was in '88, and then was given the go-ahead to attend the National Affirmation Conference that year, which was in Los Angeles. And so I went and gave a presentation on, at that time, it was just lesbian and gay Mormon history. And kind of expecting that after I gave this talk, I was like, okay, now affirmation, take over this big project, because there's a lot to do. And nothing happened, you know. And it was basically, if I don't do it, no one's going to. And but in the meantime, there was a young BYU student who had been caught on campus being gay, and in order to maintain his student status at BYU, the church asked him to attend that affirmation conference, and specifically my session, and take extensive notes and get them to the church history department as soon as possible. So he did, and I still remember him. He was sitting right there. His name was Paul. And although I didn't know this at the time, I didn't know that he was spying on me. And I stayed in LA for several days after this conference. When I got back, I got word through the Mormon underground grapevine that I had been banned from the LDS church history archives because of what I had said in my talk. And it was devastating because I had basically been living there, not actually doing research on this topic, but on other LDS church history topics. But they thought I was doing queer history there. I was not. I was doing that at the genealogy library. Yeah, so and then basically that led up to publishing my first big article on this called The Abominable and Detestable Crime Against Nature, which Signature published in an anthology. And then I put that online, and I've added onto it, and it is now kind of book length. It's huge, but in 2007 was the 30th anniversary of the founding of Affirmation, and I did a bunch of research on the day it was founded, who was there, what happened, and then presented that as the keynote speaker for the 2007 International Conference. Well, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by Affirmation, and they said, 2027, 50 years since Affirmation was founded. And we've approached Signature, and we want to do a book, another anthology on the history of Affirmation. And they invited me to give the first paper, or the first essay in that book, which will sort of revisit that research I did on the founding of Affirmation. So I'm really excited for that. That's with Lori Lee Hall, Taylor Petrie, myself, and Pam Maurer, I think is how you pronounce her name. We're sort of the ad hoc committee getting this together. So look for that publication in the future. I'm really excited for that. And I want to give a shout out to Randy. Randy, raise your hand. He's our treasurer for the Berryman Institute. Our other committee member is Megan Garcia, and she's our secretary of recording. You're right. Megan Weiss. Megan Garcia is another queer historian. I know. Sorry, I'm getting my Megans mixed up. Anyway, Megan Weiss is our recording secretary. And I'm just really excited. We've got a lot of great things planned, and so buckle up. Who's Bruce?
Bruce.
I can't get this off me. Can you? I don't know how it's. Oh, I see.
Got it?
It's stuck on my sweater.
Yeah, because it's a sweater.
Joe, darn it.
There, I got it.
Okay.
And let's put it right on here. There. How's that?
Well, we've come to the end.
My essay is about my entire life in interacting with history. I speak as much about my teaching as I do about my history studies and writing. The subtitle is Coping with Attention. It's not been easy being a person who has spent his entire life after graduating as an undergraduate being paid out of the funds of the church. My entire life has been such. I'm an employee through the Seminary Institute and then BYU Religious Education. It's many hills and many valleys and a lot of ups and downs and disappointments and frustrations, but good times. Teaching has been great, but I always had to be careful about who was looking over my shoulder. Let me go back. When I was an undergraduate, I took American history from Jim Allen, Tom Alexander, and Ted Warner, a trio together for one class. And they really got me going on history, and I decided that this is something I want to do in the future somehow, in addition to maybe my religious education teaching. Then I got into Institute in California, and it was during the Camelot years at headquarters on when Leonard Arrington, Davis Bitten, Jim Allen again were leading, and I really enjoyed the story of the Latter-day Saints as it came out, with Glenn Leonard being the co-author. And when I was there, I decided I've got to stay with this history business in addition to all else I'm teaching. Then eventually I got well acquainted with many other great teachers and of history and writers and researchers. I have dearly loved Ron Esplin and Ron Walker. I've appreciated Jill Mulvay Derr and Killacarn Madsen and Maureen Ursenbach Beecher, and it just has been David Whitaker and so many others that were influential to me as I was completing my PhD and got into teaching. My dissertation actually was on George Reynolds, and that's where this biography of him comes out. Leonard Arrington and Davis Bitten were really enthusiastically behind that project and gave me encouragement, and I'm grateful that that gave me a chance to write biography. I've loved biography. I'm continuing to do that. Let me indicate something about W.W. Phelps. In a recent Journal of Mormon History journal, I was asked to speak about or to write about my relationship with W.W. Phelps. They wanted to have all of the those who had written biographies relate to how they related to these people. And I desire now to share a bit about what I wrote then.
Are these your glasses? I stole them, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was wondering where they went. Throughout my complicated odyssey with W.W. Phelps, particularly as I wrote about him for weeks on end, I fancy myself living day to day with Phelps and his family. I sailed with him on river crafts, wandered with him on lengthy journeys, sat with him in church councils, sat at his side as he composed countless essays in his grand eloquent manner, smelled with him the ink in the printing offices, enjoyed with him many pleasant moments with Joseph Smith, and listened to him as he gave his odd and unusual public addresses. I sang hymns with him and contemplated the importance of his poetry about the restoration in Zion. I became fully aware of both the strengths and weaknesses of this flamboyant man, W.W. Phelps. I honestly feel that my biography of him was an honest portrayal of all sides of his work, his talents, and his personality. I looked in as Phelps, Oliver Cowdery, and Joseph Smith came up with the curious grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language during the translation process of the Book of Abraham. I anguished with William and Sally, his wife, as they lost 3 little children to death. I felt frustrated with Phelps as he was unfairly slandered in Far West. I rejoiced with him in reading the prophet's invitation to rejoin the saints in full fellowship. I sat with Phelps and Joseph Smith as they together composed the Wentworth Letter. that rehearsed the history of the church to that point in 1842 and included the 13 statements now known as the Articles of Faith. I joined Phelps and Willard Richards in the Joseph Smith store office in Nauvoo as they put together early portions of Joseph Smith's history, the official one, and began publishing it in Times and Seasons. And I traversed with the dusty Mormon Trail with exiled Phelps family in 1848 toward the valley of the Great Salt Lake. I was embarrassed as I watched Phelps clumsily try to practice plural marriage with numerous disappointments along the way. I considered how frustrated Phelps must have felt to see that all but 2 of his children with Sally left the church in one way or another. I was pained as William pathetically pleaded with Brigham Young and others for sustaining remuneration simply to be able to live in his twilight years. My heart really went out to William, Sally, and the rest of the family as this once significant man fell into dementia in these last 4 years. I'm actually now at the same age when Phelps lost his capacity to think and act rationally. All in all, I have felt empathy for this eccentric man, realizing that I manifest some of the same traits in my own ministry. I'm grateful to have known William Wines Phelps intimately, having spent so much of my own life learning about him. Knowing him as I do, I feel love and compassion for him and his family. I continue to sing and discuss his hymns with reverence and spirituality. I hope to meet him someday and reflect upon our common experiences. Teaching and writing while I was at BYU was not easy. There were times when we were told we couldn't publish in the alternate voices. I was invited by Sunstone and Dialogue, but I had to turn them down. I couldn't even go to Mormon History Association for a while. There were people in our administration who were looking over my shoulder and wondering what I was up to sometimes. I had some disappointments. I stopped doing church history for 15 years because of some of those disappointments. I'm grateful that times have changed at BYU as far as writing history and participating in it is concerned. They all have much more freedom than I did. But I am also discouraged at present with Brigham Young University, that means so much to me, that presently faculty are really worried over several things. My wife and I are both allies of LGBTQ people, so also are our 5 children and our adult grandchildren. And I really feel for some of the bad trends that are happening at BYU at the present time. I'm dedicated to the kingdom of God, and I will stay that way. 60 years ago, I was endowed in the Salt Lake Temple. 60 years ago today, and I decided I'm going to stick with it. But my mission is to try to help people understand all these challenges and interesting experiences we're going through. Thank you.
We are really running out of time. There's one comment. Harvard Heath and I were talking before it started, and he said that in reading Volume 1, and I'm sure he'll feel the same about Volume 2, and as you've seen tonight, the authors have shared things that are very intimate and very personal, and that's been not an easy thing for me so much. And I've had authors who have cried as I've asked them over the phone to write a chapter, and saying how upset just me asking them to write about what they had done in church history. I've had other authors write a chapter and then beg me not to allow it to be published. And this, what I've asked of these 18 people who are in this book and the 14 I think we had in the first book is not an easy task. And what they've done is remarkable. It's not me, it's what they've done, and I want to thank them. Should we get on with drawing,
Take some
or
questions.
doing signatures?
I mean, if there's anybody with questions.
Okay, Gary has a question.
I
But
do
you
have a-
always have a
I
question.
do
Now-
have a question. And so this is actually for Jill.
Okay.
You said that you worked on the Relief Society history while you and Brooke were in France and Switzerland. How did you do that? Did you have like a foot locker full of research materials that you would lug around with you?
Yes, we took a lot of boxes with us. You know, computers were a little bit different in 1985 and 1992. I think I say in my essay, I went to Brooke's office late at night to fax chapters to Maureen. We didn't have email at that time. So that did slow things down. I remember I took a little compact computer. It was, I think that was what it was, a compact 2, had a little orange screen. I worked up in, we had a lovely little apartment, and I had my desk on the second floor, which we had purchased from a Scottish antique dealer, and just wrote there. And I did come back to Salt Lake a couple of times, and I did go to Frankfurt a couple of times because Janet Cannon happened to be called with her husband to be temple president there. So yes, it was a challenge.
It's crazy.
Maybe one more question? Okay. Again, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.